This video is going to be a little different. We're going from 0 to 100 in just 5 seconds as we race through 15 iconic and unusual cars born in the 80s. Pedal to the metal. The Aston Martin Bulldog roared onto the scene in 1980, sporting a wedge-shaped body and gull-wing doors that seemed ripped from a science fiction flick. Penned by designer William Townes, this car was powered by a twin-turbocharged 5.3-liter V8 engine, rumored to produce more than 600 horsepower. For Aston Martin, known for elegant grand tours, this radical creation turned heads faster than any Bond car ever could. It was even claimed the Bulldog could reach 200 miles per hour, though official top-speed tests were few and far between. The interior was almost as startling as the exterior, featuring cutting-edge digital gauges at a time when digital dashboards were practically space-age tech. Drivers might have felt like they were piloting a spaceship rather than a car. Critics pointed out that the Bulldog's extremely low stance and poor rear visibility
technology, so it's actually weighs less than a
made it less than ideal for practical use. Only one prototype was built, partly because Aston Martin was in financial straits and focusing on more conventional models. Why is this so interesting? It defied everything people thought they knew about the brand's traditional aesthetics. Jokes aside, it shows how even the most conservative manufacturers sometimes let their designers run wild, leaving us with a legend that still sparks debate among enthusiasts over what might have happened if Aston Martin had the resources to produce it in larger numbers. In 1982, Italdesign wowed audiences with the Lancia Orca. This concept showed off a sleek, aerodynamic form that gave onlookers a glimpse into the future of European car styling. Designed by Giorgetto Giugiaro, the Orca featured a low drag coefficient, reported around 0.245, making it a genuine conversation starter for its time. The car's profile was defined by wide glass surfaces, futuristic pop-up headlights, and an almost minimalist approach to ornamentation. Performance-wise, there wasn't anything especially monstrous under the hood. It used a modest powertrain borrowed from Lancia's range. That said, the real allure was how it hinted at advanced aerodynamics and futuristic interior technology, such as digital readouts and an early take on driver-centric controls. At the time, many people thought touchscreens would never replace traditional dials, so the Orca's approach felt almost scandalous. Some criticize its radical windshield and roofline, claiming it compromised headroom. Others questioned the practicality of those delicate headlights. Yet the Orca showcased how Italy's most forward-thinking designers didn't just design beautiful cars, they tested where the industry might head a decade down the line. Although Lancia never brought the Orca to production, certain elements, like streamlined silhouettes and integrated bumpers, began creeping into later Lancia models. It's a piece of automotive history that showed style could be both exciting and very functional. Before we move on to the next one in the list, if you're enjoying this content so far, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It doesn't take much, but it means a lot to us. Thank you. The Opel Tech 1 often slips under the radar, but it's more groundbreaking than most people remember. Revealed in 1982, it was a rolling laboratory of aerodynamic wizardry, boasting a drag coefficient of 0.235, a figure even modern cars strive to achieve. Opel wanted to show the world they had serious design chops, and the Tech 1 was the perfect statement piece. Its sleek lines, flush door handles, and side mirrors integrated into the body all contributed to making it unbelievably slippery. Under the hood, it packed a relatively modest 4-cylinder engine. But raw power wasn't the point here. It was about exploring how to reduce wind resistance and improve fuel efficiency, a hot topic during an era still reeling from the 1970s fuel crisis. Inside, the Tech 1 was similarly advanced. The digital dash displayed multiple metrics, and rumor has it Opel experimented with early onboard computers for diagnostics. Talk about forward thinking. The Tech 1 was not without critiques. Some folks weren't sold on the purely functional exterior, calling it bland compared to the flashier Italian concepts. Others wondered if such extreme aerodynamic design would make manufacturing more expensive. However, it proved Opel knew how to blend style with purpose. Elements like flush glass and advanced instrumentation became more mainstream as the decade progressed, confirming the Tech 1's place as a hidden influencer of 1980s automotive evolution. Ford paraded the Probe series of concepts throughout the early to mid-1980s, to showcase new design languages and radical aerodynamic ideas. The Probe 4, revealed in 1983, took that philosophy to extremes. It employed ultra-smooth bodywork, a near-vertical tail, and a front fascia that seemed almost vacuum-formed. The idea was to see how far Ford could push drag reduction, which ended up at a super low coefficient, rumored to be around 15, practically unheard of then, or even now. It had a futuristic interior with a digital instrument panel, touch-sensitive switches, and seats so sculpted they looked like they came from a spacecraft. While the powertrain was never the main focus, Ford opted for a small, fuel-efficient engine to align with the car's mission of minimal air resistance. Some folks scoffed that it was more science project than realistic automobile, but that was partly why it was such a showstopper. Then there's the controversy. People claim the car looked too alien, and the public wasn't ready for a design so distant from the everyday. Detractors asked, where does the bumper go if you get into a fender bender? On the upside, the radical shape influenced the design cues that would later appear in the production Ford Probe, and arguably even informed aspects of the Taurus and other aerodynamic Fords of the late 1980s. Love it or hate it, the Probe 4 was an experiment that shook up design conventions. When Toyota introduced the SV3 concept, the world hadn't seen anything quite like it from the typically conservative Japanese brand. This concept directly previewed the famous Toyota MR2, which became an icon among affordable mid-engine sports cars. The SV3 flaunted a compact mid-engine layout, ensuring near-perfect balance and handling that turned twisty roads into playgrounds. It was rumored Toyota engineers had borrowed some secrets from Lotus to get that crisp steering feel just right. Performance was modest by supercar standards, but that was the point. A sporty two-seater that everyday folks could afford. That said, the concept's styling was more extreme than the eventual production model. It featured sharper angles and bolder vents, making it look like a baby Ferrari. Toyota was cautious, worried a radical design might scare off potential buyers. Some critics argued Toyota watered it down for the final MR2, but fans of the concept say it was still a revelation to see a Japanese company building a mid-engine car in the first place. The conversation gets heated when folks compare the SV3's cornering prowess to more expensive European rides. Toyota's reliability advantage didn't hurt either. Truth be told, the SV3's blend of performance, practicality, and cost-effectiveness left a lasting mark on how the industry viewed mid-engine designs. Plus, it paved the way for an entire generation of gearheads who discovered you didn't need supercar money to experience serious fun behind the wheel. Anyone who watched the 1986 movie The Wraith probably remembers Charlie Sheen's spectral ride. The Dodge M4S Turbo Interceptor. Though it's often relegated to cult film status, this concept car from 1984 had some serious firepower. Under the hood, it packed a mid-mounted 2.2-liter four-cylinder with twin-cam heads and forced induction that reportedly produced around 440 horsepower. Rumor has it, in testing, the M4S could blast from 0 to 60 mph in under 5 seconds. A big deal for the time. The exterior looked futuristic, with a sleek, low-slung body and hidden headlights giving it an almost menacing demeanor. Dodge's aim was to explore high-performance potential in a lightweight package, but they never mass-produced it, leaving many enthusiasts disappointed. Critics argued it was too extreme, possibly too expensive to bring to market. Open up the door and watch me go. And overshadowed by other Mopar muscle legends. Then there's the Hollywood factor. Some say the car became famous only because of the Wraith. Others insist it would have been a legend on its own merits. Whichever camp you side with, the M4S stands as a quintessential 80s dream machine. An icon that combined outlandish styling with real horsepower beneath the concept car glitz. Few vehicles embody the rad attitude of the era quite like the Turbo Interceptor. Nissan unveiled the NX21 in 1985 to give us a peek at their vision of ultra-efficient, high-tech motoring. This aerodynamic coupe boasted a canopy-like roof with massive glass surfaces, plus cutting-edge features like a voice command system that seemed closer to science fiction than reality. The NX-21 also toyed with alternative fuels, reportedly designed to accept a turbine engine that could run on multiple types of fuel. For the 80s, that was quite forward-thinking. The design was something out of an anime. It had an elongated nose, a truncated rear, and narrow side windows that gave it a slightly futuristic fighter jet feel. Opinions were split. Some loved the NX-21 for its boundary-pushing ideas. Others claimed it was a mishmash of experiments with no real unifying theme. Either way, it definitely showcased Nissan's appetite for taking risks. One of the biggest drawbacks? Visibility. That enormous greenhouse might have looked cool, but critics argued it created odd reflections and glare. On top of that, the voice command system was notoriously finicky, occasionally mishearing prompts, much to the amusement of journalists. The NX-21 remains a fascinating footnote in Nissan's history, proving they were unafraid to leap into the future, even if the rest of the world wasn't quite ready to jump with them. Before EV stood for electric vehicle, Saab used EV1 as an abbreviation for experimental vehicle number 1. Introduced in 1985, this Swedish concept explored advanced aerodynamics, alternative materials, and even solar power. The EV1 boasted a turbocharged inline-4 engine, delivering strong performance for its day. The real showstopper, though, was the solar panel integrated into the glass roof, used to power interior cooling fans. It might sound modest now, but in the 1980s, that was borderline sci-fi. The EV1's exterior lines were a slight departure from Saab's classic teardrop shape, but still placed a premium on aerodynamic efficiency. Inside, you found advanced digital instruments and seats designed with ergonomic research that Saab was famous for. The brand's iconic focus on safety was evident, with integrated roll bars and heavily reinforced door beams. Some folks poked fun at the name, assuming it was an all-electric prototype, but experimental vehicle was the real meaning. Critics sometimes sniped that the roof's solar panels didn't generate enough power to be truly useful. Others pointed out that the EV1's rear styling was a little too abrupt, yet there's no denying how forward-thinking it was. These innovations subtly trickled down to later Saabs, from more aerodynamic bodywork to a continued emphasis on occupant comfort. Jokes aside, if the EV1 had gone mainstream, Saab might have led the world in solar integration long before it was a trend. When you hear Lamborghini, you expect low-slung supercars with V12 engines. The Portofino concept from 1986 broke that mold. Built on a stretched Jalpa chassis, it was actually a four-door sedan. Yes, a Lambo sedan. Styled by Kevin Verdun, it was intended to show that Lamborghini might branch beyond its two-door heritage. Under the hood, it retained the Jalpa's 3.5-liter V8, pumping out around 255 horsepower, not groundbreaking, but respectable for a luxury sedan concept. The design was angular, featuring scissor doors up front and regular hinge doors at the back, which some people found delightfully weird. Others saw it as a contradiction, a Lamborghini with 4 seats, more akin to a futuristic family car. Talk about controversial. Purists decried it as heresy, while the curious welcomed the possibility of a Lambo that could carry more than 2 people. In a sense, it foreshadowed today's 4-door coupes, though the Portofino itself never reached production. Its interior was quite plush by 80s standards, although some claimed it leaned a bit too heavily on geometric shapes that might date quickly. The brand's shaky finances at the time likely played a role in shelving the project. In all honesty, it's a fascinating chapter in Lamborghini's history, especially considering how successful the brand's modern 4-door Urus SUV has become. Maybe the Portofino was just too far ahead of its time. In 1987, Chevrolet went all out with the Corvette Indy concept, aiming to marry cutting-edge race technology with street-legal potential. Power came from a mid-mounted 2.65-liter V8 derived from IndyCar racing, rumoring up to 600 horsepower. That alone blew minds, but the exotic factor didn't stop there. It featured all-wheel drive, 4-wheel steering, and active suspension, features you'd hardly expect in a street car of that era. The sleek body drew attention with scissor doors and integrated rear wing, making it look more like a Le Mans racer than a Corvette. Critics argued it was so far removed from the standard Corvette DNA that it was basically a separate species. Fans disagreed, viewing it as an exhilarating glimpse into the future of American supercars. Then there's the interior. Loaded with digital displays, It was a cockpit that looked borrowed from NASA. Controversy arises when comparing it to the actual production Corvette C4 and C5. The concept's sophistication was leaps ahead, yet GM never fully realized those advanced features in the showroom models. Some believe the Corvette Indy was simply too ambitious and too expensive for the consumer market of the time. That being said, it stands as a shining example of American automakers aiming for the stars, reminding us how the 80s were full of dream-big attitudes that sometimes caught the industry off guard. Pontiac's Banshee line of concept cars started in the 1960s, but the Banshee the Whirr 4 from 1988 is the one that truly stunned crowds. It arrived with a sleek, long hood short deck design that many say influenced the styling of the 1993-2002 Firebird and even the 4th-gen Camaro. Featuring pop-up headlights and swooping lines, it looked downright predatory. The Banshee the 4 wasn't just a styling exercise, though. It aimed to explore lightweight materials like fiberglass and composite panels. Under the skin, there were rumors of a potent V8, though Pontiac kept performance details hush-hush. Some automotive journalists guessed it could easily make 300 horsepower, which, for a late 80s concept, was pretty potent. The interior showcased a heads-up display in a digital gauge cluster that was advanced for its day. Critics worried it might be too polarizing for mainstream tastes, but that's exactly what made the Banshee the 4 so memorable. There's a bit of controversy surrounding whether the Banshee the 4 overshadowed the Fiero's performance potential. Some fans lamented that Pontiac poured resources into a concept while the Fiero was eventually canceled. In reality, the Banshee 4 proves how designers can tease the future without ever promising production. It teased fans with the possibility of a new American sports car that, had it arrived, could have changed Pontiac's entire trajectory. The Dodge Viper concept, unveiled in 1989, was a jaw-dropping vision of raw American horsepower. Penned by Tom Gale, it sported a massive 8.0-liter V10 under the long vented hood. Although horsepower figures were still being finalized, early estimates placed it at around 400 horses, an absurd figure for the time. The body was curvaceous, yet intimidating, capturing the essence of a classic muscle car with modern flair. People couldn't decide if it was an homage to the Shelby Cobra or a brand new breed of performance monster. The interior was bare bones. Dodge wanted to keep it lightweight and driver-focused. Critics said it was too Spartan for a 90s performance vehicle, but fans insisted that's exactly what made the concept so appealing. Who needs cup holders when you're clinging to a 6-speed transmission for dear life? The biggest controversy was whether a low-volume, monstrous V10 Roadster made any sense in an era leaning toward efficiency and practicality. Nevertheless, the outcry was overwhelmingly positive, leading Dodge to greenlight production. The concept's fundamental design stayed surprisingly true to what ultimately hit showrooms in 1992. The 1989 Dodge Viper concept reintroduced brutal, unfiltered power to American sports cars at a time when emissions rules and economic pressures were pushing manufacturers towards safer, tamer options. It remains a testament to how the best concepts can break all the rules and still succeed. Designed by Pininfarina, the Ferrari Mythos debuted at the 1989 Tokyo Motor Show, capturing hearts with its minimalistic speedster look and dramatic wedge shape. Based on the platform of the Ferrari Testarossa, it carried a 4.9-liter flat 12 engine rumored to pump out around 390 horsepower. The Mythos was an exercise in extremes, trading a practical windshield for a low wraparound screen that barely protected the driver from the wind. It looked downright radical. Many Ferrari purists adored the Mythos, seeing it as a spiritual successor to the open-top racing Barchettas of the 1950s. Others found it too flashy, criticizing the over-the-top wedge proportions. But that's part of what made it so memorable. The interior was similarly Spartan, featuring a single row of digital indicators behind the steering wheel, which was considered radical for a Ferrari at the time. The rumor mill churned out speculation that the Mythos might make it to limited production. Though Ferrari squashed those hopes, a few wealthy collectors apparently convinced Ferrari to build highly custom versions. But the official line remained that it was a one-off concept. In all seriousness, the Mythos added to the brand's aura of exclusivity, giving fans something to dream about while emphasizing that sometimes a concept car is meant to stay just that, a myth. By 1989, Mazda had almost finalized the production version of the MX-5 Miata. But in the run-up, they paraded a prototype that gave the public a taste of what was coming. It was a back-to-basics roadster, lightweight, rear-wheel drive, and powered by a 1.6-liter four-cylinder engine with around 116 horsepower, modest yet purposeful. The concept revealed Mazda's aim to rekindle the joy of British sports cars, minus the notorious reliability issues. The prototype had slightly different taillights and some interior cues that wouldn't make the final cut. But the essence remained the same. Driving purity was the name of the game, and that quickly turned into a selling point that made the Miata a global sensation. Critics questioned whether a small, open-top sports car had a place in an era where coupes and hot hatches dominated. However, the concept's immediate popularity silenced most doubters. Controversy? Some gearheads dismissed it as underpowered, labeling it a hairdresser's car. Mazda countered that the Miata's 50-50 weight distribution and nimble handling more than compensated for any horsepower deficit. The Miata's explosive success vindicated Mazda's concept, ushering in a renaissance of affordable sports cars and proving that sometimes simple is better. The 1989 prototype stands as the pivot point where Mazda said, "Let's give people a reason to smile behind the wheel again." Jaguar dropped jaws in 1988 with its XJ2220 concept, aptly named for its promised top speed of 220 mph. This sleek, low-slung prototype boasted a mid-mounted all-wheel drive V12 that roared with around 500 horsepower, though exact figures were shrouded in secrecy at the time. Scissor-style doors added an exotic flair that nobody expected from the British marque. Media hype soared, as everyone wanted to see if Jaguar could actually build what looked like the world's fastest production car. Controversy bubbled up when the final production version arrived in 1992, powered not by that glorious V12, but by a twin-turbo V6, and sporting only rear-wheel drive. Early depositors were incensed about the radical switch. Jaguar insisted the V6 was lighter and better suited to racing development, but that did little to calm purists who yearned for the guttural roar of a big cat. Still, the XJ220 in its production form ended up claiming one of the highest top speeds of its era, hitting an incredible 217 mph in testing. Critics argued that, even with a top speed that brushed 220 mph, Jaguar overpromised and underdelivered by abandoning all-wheel drive and V12 power. Others pointed out that the car's presence alone sparked renewed interest in British supercars, placing Jaguar firmly in the conversation alongside Ferrari and Porsche. Truth be told, this concept's polarizing journey from showstopper to street-legal rocket helped shape the 90s supercar wars, proving that when Jaguar aims big, they don't do it halfway. The 2020 concept remains a testament to the wild ambition of the late 80s, an era defined by dreams that were sometimes too massive, yet thrilling enough to inspire the next generation of automotive icons. Thanks for sticking around this long on our tour of the most unusual 1980s concept cars. Jokes aside, these vehicles weren't just fun experiments. They shaped the very cars we drive now. Hope you found this video helpful and entertaining. If you want more deep dives into automotive oddities and legends, smash that subscribe button so you never miss another ride. Buckle up, because there's always something awesome on the horizon. Safe travels, and see you next time.